record on this computer. Okay. I am recording. So if you guys could be so kind, go to the chat, which is Alt-H, and just sign in. That way I would be grateful. So thank you ever so much for taking part of your day and coming out to hang out with me. So today we are going to talk about course assessments, feedback, things that are related to that. And though the topics that I'm really talking about are a set of standards from the OSCQR or quality review for online courses. So this is number 6 in a 5-part series, and there are links that will take you to the rest of the recordings. I will save those until the end and share those. So I guess kind of rules of engagement. I use the chat a lot, so I have the chat running off on the side. So if you have questions and stuff, please use the chat. Or if you have burning questions, feel free to unmute and dive right in. I'd be happy to entertain questions along the way. So, but let's get started. So when students are taking your class, they definitely have an expectation to develop knowledge about the topic that you have. And this doesn't matter if it's face-to-face or online or a hybrid course or, an email course, whatever. They have a certain expectation that they're going to learn something. And ideally, as instructors, you also have an expectation that they're going to learn something. So you have kind of 2 roles here. That one, you're providing the instruction so they can develop this knowledge and skills, but also you have a responsibility to assess students to see if in fact they are meeting your learning objectives and picking up this knowledge. So the big question is, how do you know students are mastering the course and are taking advantage of the feedback that you provide them? You want to create a feedback loop for your students so they can master this content and walk away at a higher level. And there's all kinds of different content that we can provide students, but at the end of the day, we're just trying to raise the level and have them walking away with a new set of skills. So let's talk about different ways that in an online course that we can make sure that we are getting the right things to students, that they're aware of the feedback loops, that we're providing different assessments and different ways for students to grasp this material. So the first thing is your course grading policies have to be really clear. For, and something that I've been talking about across this whole series of presentations is in an online mode, you have to do a little extra to make sure that students are very clear on what you want them to do, how you want them to do it, and why you want them to do it. In a face-to-face course, you honestly can be a little more sloppy. And what I mean is that if someone's not clear about it, they immediately raise their hand, they ask the question, you mention it, you move on. But in an online course, there's a little bit more reluctance for students to do that. And as a result, you end up getting something back and go, why did they send this? What happened? And it usually comes back to instructions are not clear. So instructions tend to become clearer every time you roll over a course and you make improvements. But let me just ask this little question here. This is a participatory question. So in your courses, do you have clear grading policies? Do you feel that your policies are crystal clear, that students have no doubt what you expect from them? Or, you know, it could be in your syllabus or in your information area. And if you're not teaching online, I guess that would be a no. You know, but you also hand out a you know, face-to-face. So how many? We got 7 of 7. All right, you guys are awesome. So right now, the greatest majority of you believe, in fact, that your grading policies are clear. One of the strategies that I have for the courses that I have taught is, you know, normally like my syllabus, I have available in a Google Docs. And instead of just sharing the Google Doc as view only, I share it as comment. And what I encourage students to do is to add comments where there's areas where it's muddy. And if I provide an instruction for an assignment, I do the same thing. All my assignments are made comments. You know, instead of just share or view, they have comments so they can allow that to be happening. So thank you for participating right away. So I appreciate that. So the other part in, you know, building these, you know, making these clear is, as you are building out your instruction, is really to tie it also back to the objectives. So when you're creating an assignment, make a comment how this is related to whatever course objective or whatever criterion objective, because course objectives tend to be more nebulous. They're kind of bigger, overreaching. But when you get down to the criterion objectives, they should be really, you know, you're asking them to do a specific thing. So there's a book called, well, I have a couple books that talk about it, but, you know, just making sure that you're always talking about the course objectives, because very often the course objectives are put in the syllabus and nobody ever sees them again. But if you want to strengthen the learning, strengthen your assessments, and, you know, just really tie it back to what they're learning and why and how, having those things tie back to the objective. So I was looking at a course earlier today, doing a review on it, and, you know, each week comes and goes, but there are nothing talking about the objectives, what the instructor hopes the students will gain from that particular that week or that particular module. That's something that you can do to strengthen your course. For online courses, one of the comments that I hear very often from instructors is that online courses are very time intensive, that because you're dealing with the written word all the time, that it's really very hard to grade some things. And what you can do is you can simplify your grading using rubrics, using specifications grading, for example, where you can, you know, make things either pass or fail, and giving that feedback through those rubrics that can help speed up the grading that you have to do.
Stan, do you have rubric resources, or maybe you're going to talk about them and how to create them? Or
I have lots of references to creating rubrics. I use rubrics all the time in the courses that I build, and you can build those right into Blackboard. So when you're grading something, you can just mark the rubric appropriately, and it'll assess the appropriate points, and then you can have some written feedback along with it.
Yeah, I mean, I have rubrics. I just don't know that I'm good at making them. That's my problem.
No, and that's a good challenge. And also, you know, for, I guess, a rubric and thinking about universal design for learning, is you're trying to increase choice. So actually, the
Yes.
idea is to make your rubric more generic so you can look at more products or different types of products, whether someone turns in a video, you know, a slide deck, you know, a podcast or whatever. Are they hitting those key elements that you want them to touch upon, you know, as you're doing it? So yeah, there's fortunately there's like all kinds of rubrics out there, and you just kind of modify them to your needs, you know, with that criteria in mind. So hopefully that helped. I see you nodding, but I see you rolling your eyes too.
Yeah,
So.
no, I'm not rolling my eyes. I mean, it helps. I just don't know what resources are good resources, right? There's so much out there on rubrics, and
Sure.
I read through all this stuff, but I'm not, I just, you know, I feel like there should be some streamlined process, top secret process someplace that could make my job easier. And that's all I'm wondering if you know of anything.
but unfortunately it's not. But it's, you know,
Yeah.
I'd love to sit down with you and just talk rubrics, you know, on how to build a rubric, and maybe that's something I can talk about in the future. You know, just building a rubric that serves the needs, that provides good feedback, as well as makes life easy for grading. You know,
Yes.
I'm a huge
Yes.
fan of specifications grading. Either they meet all the criteria and it's good to go, or if not, I kick it back and I allow them to redo it. But that's just me. So
I have some that I like that too, but okay,
yeah,
thank you.
sure. And so, you know, one of the things in your, you know, talking about your policies, you know, for grading, you know, part of that is talking about late policies, what to do with lateness. You know, I've seen some instructors just say, no, it's late and you get 0 points, which, just my personal opinion, I don't think that necessarily measures an objective, unless one of your objective is that time management is weaved into this. You know, so I always, you know, you may give less points because it's late, you know, a deduction, but you know, 0 can be catastrophic depending on how many assignments you have. So I am a fan of regrading, that if something's wrong, they certainly didn't meet the standard, they didn't learn the lesson. It's like, all right, here's feedback, let's make it better, send it back to me and I'll regrade it. And so, you know, if you have regrading rules, you know, certainly stick those in there. So
Stan, something that we do in OT, we try to do that, but then students were, you know, they get a B on something and they turn it in. It was so much grading. So we allow regrades if they get below a C. And it has to be within a week. Like they don't have the whole semester to do it. And some of it is professionalism, you know, for us, but we just found like regrading things over and over again was just a lot of extra work. But
yeah, it kind of sounds like work, you know. There's
extra work though. We already
no,
are working.
I know, but I mean, we do a lot of, hey, this is not right, you know. I mean, we're working on the middle states and we're working on it over and over and over and over again. You know, it's, you know, also part of work, but I also understand that you have a deadline. You know, if you're going to go for a grant, there's a deadline, right? So
Right.
you know, it's just finding that happy balance between what is the objective we're trying to get at,
Right.
you know, and, you know, moving things along that way. So
True.
so you know, either you can come up online, right, unmute and share, or in the chat, share your thoughts on, are there like any specific grading policies that you do that you want to just share with the group, as well as regrading policies? You can unmute and share like Sarah has done, or you can put it in the chat. Either way, that's good. I'll give you a second to do that and I'll shut up. And we'll just stare at each other. Hearing no volunteers. Shy crowd. Okay, well, I am just going to move on then. So in your course, one of the things that you want to also think about is including frequent and appropriate methods for assessment. And there are some courses where there's only a midterm and a final, and that's it. That is catastrophic for students. If they don't do well on the midterm and they don't do well on the final, they're done. And that doesn't necessarily reflect how well they're doing. So, but I'm getting some sharing back here. So thanks, Cindy. I was too quick. So, so Jan mentioned that that she doesn't do a lot of regrading, but for formal lab reports, yes, but not formal. So.
Yeah, that just, over in the sciences, I don't think we typically do a lot of regrading. But when we're looking for them to understand a proper format that something needs to be written in, or, you know, students know for research papers, for example, they can come to me and I will give them an overview and I can give them some feedback. But I don't have it formally set where they give me a first draft and then a second draft. It's an informal way of going about doing it.
Yeah. Okay. Very cool. Yeah. I mean, you're trying to build, you know, one of those life skills, and you know, getting report formats. You know, I wish, you know, when I was working on my grad, that somebody gave me the secret handshake a lot earlier. It would have made writing, you know, the papers I had to write a lot easier, and I had to kind of trip upon it. But yeah, so doing those kind of things is very useful. And Cindy shares that allowed to take chapter quizzes twice, but it's the average of the two scores. Yeah, so taking it, you know, taking it again could bring their grade down. So very cool. And Susan shares physical participation. So the class grading, so each class is graded equally. No regrading policy from Anne, and a reduction up to 1 week. So if they don't get turned in by the week, then I guess I'm going to assume that it's 0 after that. So, okay.
I do the same thing relative to the late policy. But I also make it clear to them that they need to talk to me, because sometimes there are extenuating circumstances. And, you know, I understand strict policies, but I think, you know, being human in this also needs to kind of play a role. And I'm also very careful that what I'm doing is going to be fair to the other students. That's always my mantra, is I need to make sure that what I do for this student is fair to everybody else. So. Absolutely.
And, you know, I mean, for me, my deadline is the last day of class. I don't take anything after the last day of class, because they have 16 weeks to get it to me, or 15 weeks, depending on whatever class I'm teaching. And I have regrading throughout the whole class. I've never been overwhelmed, but I'm not teaching 4 or 5 classes at a time. So very cool. All right. So while we have other comments coming in, let's go to a new poll. So does your course include frequent and appropriate methods to assess mastery? So, you know, you're giving them a lot of different opportunities to demonstrate their knowledge, but I would also add variety, you know, that it's not just multiple guess quizzes, that, you know, that you have written assignments and maybe performance type assignments, and, you know, quizzing certainly baked in, and all those things. So 6, 7 out of 8, 7 out of 8. We got one more out there. Looking for 8 out of 8.
Yeah, I'm the holdout. I just put it in. It depends on which course. I mean, it depends. Labs are a whole lot different than lectures.
Sure, absolutely.
Get a whole lot more opportunity in many different formats to be able to give me information, assessment information. But in lectures, that's a little bit different. So the frequency is not quite the same as what I have in labs.
Right. Well, I would, one of the things, I would strongly encourage is try not to make those catastrophic, weighted assignments where one part, it's worth 50% of your entire grade. That can be a make or break, but just, kind of distribute it, make it more frequent, make it more varied. It's just something I think it benefits the students that there's lots of different opportunities for them to assess where they're at and to continue building on the skills and build the feedback. Okay. So, Andrew's sharing that courses that he has have pass-fail assignments that are building up to a final project. I'll have to, okay, so he brings up a good thing, right? He doesn't want to necessarily be overwhelmed at the end of the semester. And I don't either. And I'm a huge fan of that. I do what are called quests. And so I have all these little mini assignments that are kind of blocked into different objectives. And, I use kind of bonus points to keep things moving along, that if they're turning in things on a regular basis, I give bonus points. And if they do something, throughout the term, boom, they get, a few extra bonus points. If they don't get those extra bonus points, and they got to keep working at it. They got to do extra work in a way.
How many students have taken that up, Stan?
Sorry?
How many students have taken or utilized that method?
Majority of them.
Okay, awesome.
Yeah, I don't get slammed at the end of a term with a lot of extra things to do. I've kind of figured out how to entice them, and I continuously remind them. I have what's called a burn down chart. So for the students, all the points that they need, and I just kind of work my way down to zero, and I can show that sometime. But this last class I was teaching, they were 2 weeks ahead. That 2 weeks before the end of the course, they had completed all the content, as far as assignments. So I was very happy with that. So lots of different strategies for how to do that. So so there's a lot of I've been hearing a lot of talk about having quizzes and about quizzes and exams. There's a lot of emphasis, and most of it has been how can we keep students from cheating. And one way of doing that is actually going back to authentic assessments, where you're tapping into, written assignments, interactive discussions, collaboration, where they have to be definitely participants in this, instead of, I think quizzes have to be built in. I think by increasing the frequency of quizzes, that you can tamp down, the cheating. There's a lot of different strategies for doing that, but, tapping into, definitely interactive discussions and collaborative exercises, that helps, with controlling some of those.
Hey, Stan, can I share with everybody something that we do in OT that's like a team-based learning with quizzes that works really well? So
No.
students, okay.
Go ahead.
Sorry, I shouldn't have asked. So at the beginning of the semester, one of my classes, I group students into teams, and they work as teams throughout the entire semester in various things. But each week for their chapters, they have to do an individual readiness assessment test. So they take a test, multiple choice test, and then they turn that in, and then they get with their group, and their group does the same test. So then they have a conversation about all of the questions on the test, and then they turn that one in, and I average the grades unless the team test is less than the individual. But I think that that makes a really good learning, because then the students are learning from each other. It's graded. It's sort of lower stakes. I feel like they're only like 10 question quizzes. It keeps them on reading their chapters, which is really important for us to move forward. You know, they have to have the content knowledge, but yeah, I found it to be really effective, and students really, really enjoy it. When I survey them at the end of the program, they always reflect back on the team-based learning stuff that they did in the team and individual tasks. So just a
Yeah, that's
strategy.
a very cool strategy. Thanks for sharing that. So yeah, and you know that I've heard it. You know, that same strategy. You know, certainly with twists where they've done that. Another strategy is just doing a group test. You know, that they're put into groups and they work on it as a collective. You know, that they get to cuss and discuss about it. So different ways. One of the things, if you have, if you're just new to Blackboard, or it doesn't matter if you're new or old to Blackboard, dive in and really just get to understand how the gradebook works. So, we have this initiative going on through the summer. One of the things you can do is go into LinkedIn Learning and really dive into the grading and the rubrics and how that works, and see how you can use them for inline grading. So inline grading is when they send a paper through Blackboard and you have the ability to grade it. So you can have a rubric there that you can do the rubric, as well as provide written grading, for those particular things. So for different types of assessments, and when we talk assessments, this is also assignments and homework and those kind of things that you can weave in. When you are looking at your course, I encourage you to build out your course on a spreadsheet before you go into Blackboard. So in your spreadsheet, you're going to identify what week you're at, what content they're going to review, what the objectives are, what assessments that you're providing, all this. So this is an example, and this is what we're doing for education and their OER courses. Well, this is not education. This was a template, an example. But really looking at, what you're doing, but do it on a spreadsheet. And that way you can visually see what kind of balance you have in your course, that where you're not overwhelming them, or you have periods where, you've just got these huge gaps and they're not doing anything. And that way you can make sure that you got the frequency and the variety and all that baked in before you go in and build it out, in Blackboard. But also making sure that, for your particular week in your learning module, that what the learning objectives are going to be, and that you have appropriate assessments that can measure those particular objectives, right? So just kind of getting balance there.
It's so funny. I wish my background, I have a master's in adult education, but I got that after I started teaching. Like, this stuff would have been so helpful as a new teacher. How to create I've sort of figured out how to create curriculum through my years of just doing it, but like a spreadsheet, that's such a good idea. I don't have my stuff in a spreadsheet.
So
Would you,
even when I create a PowerPoint presentation,
yeah,
I start with a spreadsheet instead of going to PowerPoint. Right?
Yeah, I don't do that.
Yeah, so I outline mine before I even go here. And so.
Stan, would you be willing to share a template, or sort of what you put into your, maybe not, you could for PowerPoint, but definitely for a course? I would love to have an idea of the important things you put in there, or not.
Yeah, I can. I'll go see if I can find one, and share it. So.
I would appreciate that. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and so this is another example. This was actually for a course I did on doing online teaching, and so this is all doing my quests, right? And so I had them broken up into major things like resource builder, activity builder, you know, and what quests that they had to do in order to kind of move through the course, right? And this was this was using a program called it was called 3D Game Builder. It's changed its name. I think it's Resily or something like Resi now. But you know, so I had to identify a lot of different things before I could go build it into that program. But I had to use a spreadsheet to be able to calculate everything. And so they went in and basically played a game in order to move through their course. So what kind of different assessments are you guys, you know, using in your classroom? What, feel free to share in the chat. What kind of different assessment, or come up online, you know, online or unmute and feel free to share. This is very participatory.
Well, I'm a little out of sequence here as others are thinking about what they want to put in for this one. I was thinking about your spreadsheet idea, and I do something similar to that, but I learned a long time ago, and it was actually a faculty development day workshop that we had that kind of got me on this roll, where I actually write out an outline of what we're doing in a given day. It's actually out in an outline form, and then my PowerPoint matches that outline, so that they know what the major points are, they know what the sub points are, they know just by looking at the side board when I'm teaching in you know, physically face to face, they know where we are, where we've been, and where we're going, so that they can see the big picture right there in class as they're going through the microscopic little details of the notes. So that's just, but it makes me think of your spreadsheet idea. It's very similar to that, where they can actually get that big view along with me in terms of where we're going. And that has been very helpful. I've had a good number of students comment that they appreciate having the notes put in a format so that they can understand the importance and what goes where. So.
Yeah, no, great tip. Yeah, the spreadsheet I showed was actually just for me to build the course, but I like how you are sharing, you know, an aspect of that to keep them on task. And doing that in an online course is huge. And matter of fact, we'll talk about that a little ways down the road, but doing exactly that. So thanks. Anybody else have anything? And I'll just wait for it to pop in the chat too, and we'll come back to it. So very cool.
And we do in OT, I rarely do just exams. So we do all sorts of community-based projects. We do case studies. We have them watch videos. They have to do treatment plans. They have to do research papers. So we have presentations, papers, demonstration of skills. They have to create things. I have an assignment where they actually have to make things out of random supplies, make interventions. So in a field like OT, I think we're able to be more flexible like that, because we're sort of demonstrating what students are going to do when they're in the field. So I think some of those things might be harder in some other classes, like A&P, for example, might be more difficult to do some of those things, but we assess them in a lot of different ways. And we also have a professionalism assessment that we sort of do like a 360 evaluation on them for professionalism, which is also interesting. So
yeah, I think sometimes we get locked into how it was done to us, right? And part of it is opening up and, you know, doing this idea of benchmarking. And when I was in the Air Force, they stressed the idea of benchmarking a lot. So the Air Force is, you know, as an example, the Air Force's supply system at one time sucked, right? They could not get anything anywhere at any time, and it was so horrible. But they determined that they were going to fix it, so they sent a team to folks that could get things to another place overnight, and that was FedEx. So they went to FedEx to learn how to do it, and now they have a wonderful supply system. But I think the same thing applies in education, that, by having these, professional development opportunities and applying that what if, that we can extend, what we do. So, I think Jan mentioned earlier that in STEM, we're more likely to do X. But have we tried Y and Z? Have we, explored that? And just being open to the idea, it's like, well, let's try it. And if it doesn't work, either we make a small tweak or we move on to something else, just being open to those, different ways of assessing. So very cool, right? And shared lab reports, Jan, quizzes, exams, homework assignments, group projects, research, lots of cool ways. And shared lab report is required after doing an experiment. Very cool. Thank you. Let's moving on to, so are the criteria for your assessments of graded assignments clearly articulated? Do you share the rubrics? Do you share exemplary products? Things that other students have created in the past that you got permission to share, as examples, to make sure that folks are on track. And, this is definitely for this online world that, once again, there, sometimes it's, somebody has a question on how to do an assignment and they send you an email, but, we know how email is, and then suddenly 2 days go by and they still don't have an answer. So making sure that these things are as clear as possible. So we're at 7 out of 8, 7 out of 8, 7 out of 8. Looking for that 8th person. Tick tock, tick tock. All right, I'm going to end polling.
Not me this time.
All right. Anyways, folks seem to be doing pretty well there. So I really appreciate that. Yeah, those things are important. Making sure that you provide as much information about the assignment as possible to keep them on track, right? Naturally, there are some assignments where things may be a little more obscure, and that's fine. That may be intentional as part of the assignment. But in most assignments, I'm finding that people need to just be as clear as possible, because students want the grade. They want to get a good grade, and when it is not clear, it frustrates them. And if they don't get a quick answer, it frustrates them even more. So making sure that you take time up front. And once again, like I said, my assignments, I go ahead and I do them in Google Docs and I share them as comments. So if I'm not clear, I ask them to add a comment where I can add clarity, and we go from there. So rubrics are a recommended best practice that, you can go look at the rubric and you kind of mark where it is. For specs grading is basically, is it yes or no? Either they're doing it or they're not doing it. So rather than have all these points, it's yes or no. And if any one of them is no, you kick it back to get it fixed. That's the idea of specifications grading. But, and this is a rubric that I'm using for program plan, and they can turn it in all kinds of different ways. But really, I'm looking for a written product. So, as we noted, a rubric should be given up to the students well ahead of time. So you would have the rubric baked into Blackboard for the grading, but also have a written copy of that rubric so they can have that available to them, well ahead of time. So that will just kind of get you the work that you're looking for. And also having examples that other students have put together. You know, if you've taught the course multiple times, you know, you have those students that, you know, are doing crazy good work. And if you ask them for permission so they can share it with other students, very often, you know, they're proud of that and they will allow that to do that. So, and, you know, talking about rubrics, so I see Jan's note, provide a rubric before and then after with the scores. Another strategy with a rubric is to have them fill out the rubric also, right? That you can have them do it as a reflective piece on the assignment and have them fill out the rubric, you know, and see how it compares to how you filled out the rubric, you know, and you know, come to an understanding of why there's a gap between what you provided and what they provided. So, John, you know, I would say yes. You know, written is always better, you know, in the court of law. But, you know, for me, if someone says I can use it, I put it in my folder of I can use, and I go from there. So, new poll. Learners have opportunities to review their performance and assess their own learning throughout the course. Self-assessment, launch poll. So do you provide opportunities like, you know, pre-tests or even self-tests that may not necessarily be formally graded, maybe as extra credits, something, you know, so if you're learning, you know, they talked about learning language or vocabulary for a discipline, where you can build a vocabulary quiz that they can take just simply for extra credit. That the only way they get credit is if they get 100%, and they are allowed to take it as many times as they want. And they found that that helps them actually learn the language, you know, so. And you can build test pools. So you can, you know, you can make this using a test pool, say dealing with vocabulary for a discipline, where chapter 1 focuses on chapter 1 vocabulary. Chapter 2 is maybe 75% of chapter 2 and 25% of chapter 1. And you can pull from the test pool randomly and have these tests available. So we are still at 7 of 8. Anyone else want to dive in? All right, ending the poll, sharing the results. So kind of half and half. When possible, you know, try to provide these opportunities where they can reflect. So a really, really powerful assignment, and this ties back to using your objectives, is a reflective assignment where you ask them, do they feel that the assignment that you provided helped them achieve the objective of the module or the core, you know, the week or whatever it is? Asking questions that you know, what was your preparation to do this particular assignment? Do you feel that it was adequate to do this assignment? So, so we're getting some thoughts here. Okay. So Jan provides review sessions, review outlines. You know, a strategy with that is to have students create group notes or team notes, you know, using Google Docs, that you can have them, you know, build these team notes, and rather, you know, that you can also go in and enhance.
I actually stepped that a little bit with the students. The very first review guide that they get for their first exam has a series of questions that they can go in and they can answer. And if they get stuck on something, they can ask me, but they use it as kind of a checklist, but it matches the outline that I teach in. so
Sure.
that they know where to go to find, answers. And then as we get to the second exam and then finally to the third, because I have 3 major exams, but quizzes intermittently, I teach them how to go through and ask their own questions as they go through and study and they do the review. So they get the example of that in the first review guide, but then they just get a review guide with just an outline basically, so that they're not missing any content, but they're taught how to go through and ask questions about their own. I tell them, pretend you're the teacher, you're asking questions, you're creating the test. So
Great
I kind of
strategy. Yeah, very cool.
the process of how to self-quiz.
Yeah, nice, nice. We should probably have you share that sometime, how you do that. So, and John, it says English students do reflective pieces throughout the semester. They go into portfolios for review and other folks. Susan sharing that exit ticket at the end of class, whether they understand the objective, think, pair, share throughout the class. Great strategies. The reflective piece really focuses on them understanding the process. It doesn't necessarily focus on the content, but more of, this idea of learning to learn and how they become masters in that particular discipline and those things. So I'm a huge fan of those kind of things. Okay. So these self-assessments allows them to progress. So different ways that you can use what's called adaptive learning, that maybe they have to take a pretest before they start that learning module, that before they get access to your content, that you have a pretest that they do. And it doesn't matter necessarily what they score, but the fact that having them go through being active learners where they're trying to answer questions, or maybe you require them to read a chapter, do this pretest before you give them, more detailed, and we're looking, at online courses, that they have to really think about the material before they dive into it. So they just kind of get their hands dirty a little bit. And that helps activate that learning. End of module, non-graded, test your knowledge as a gateway before learners move on. So you can also not only do starting a module, what's going to be presented, but at the end of it, you may have one of these quizzes that serves as a gate before they can get to the next module, to the next content that they have to achieve a certain grade, maybe 75% or 80%. And if they don't, they have to go back and, kind of review and be able to take that test again before they can get to the next module. So really depending on how you want to set up your course. So providing an opportunity for reflection. It can be, in Blackboard, you have journals, which are usually between the participant and the instructor, but you can also do blogs, where a blog is where the rest of the members of the class get to see what they're thinking about that topic. And you can use it as a reflective exercise. And other students may be able to provide commentary on that. So discussion boards are another place where they can do this. But each has its own little nuances how they work. And just providing some type of guidance in what you're looking for in a reflective piece. And maybe they have to answer certain questions. So for example, what was your process to prepare for what was your process to prepare for the quiz? How did you study? Do you feel that, and this may be just before they get their grade. Do you feel that this was adequate, to prepare? what are strategies you think you would take, going forward? So you can weave those kind of things into, have those prompts that you want them to answer for that. John Keating asks, what do you value more, discussion boards or blogs? They are two different types of assessments. So, they both help develop community. I use a lot of discussion boards. That doesn't necessarily, I value them more. But yeah, they're just different. I don't, it's presentations are a way to do things. I don't necessarily value that more. It's just a different type of assessment. It's a matter of, just kind of experiment with it. So. And Sarah's asking, does anybody have a discussion board rubric that they're willing to share? I have a rubric. It's very simple. I grade students on a 0 to 3 points. Over the course of the week, they have to earn 20 points, but 0 to 3 for each post. And, I use what's called the IRA format for students for their initial posts, that they have to provide 3 insights, a resource external to the course, and an application, how they plan to apply it. So one, did they fulfill all that? And was it done in a scholarly manner? And, based on that was it worthy of 3 points? And then after that, how students reply, did it help keep the conversation going, or was it, yeah, that's a great idea, I may use it, that didn't really move things along and add to the course and help build community. So, but I can certainly share that with you, Sarah. So.
Thank you.
How are you guys, what kind of self-assessments do you have, where you're just getting students just to kind of practice this, learning of the vocabulary, learning of the concepts, the skills that they have to use? What kind of things are you guys doing?
We have a portfolio assignment that's every semester they have to do a professional portfolio. And for each section of their portfolio, they have to write, it begins with a reflective statement about that section of the portfolio. So sort of how, what are their strengths in that section and what are the areas of needed growth in that section? And so they do that every semester for their portfolio. And that's one example, but
yeah.
Sort of reflects on their professional development skills.
Sure. Thanks, Sarah. Yeah. Cool. All right. I'll wait for comments to slide in. Or Jan, I see you unmuted.
Yeah. Well, I'm a talker. It varies so much. I teach so many different classes. It just varies depending upon, we do self-reflective essays. In my Science Connection course, they look at how they worked with the 4th graders and they assess how the students were learning, what would they have done differently, that kind of thing. So it varies so much. In a straight anatomy class, it's sample quizzes and blank diagrams and taking little sticky tabs and putting them on skeletons, and on muscle charts and things like that. So there are just so many different ways that.
Yeah, and I know for A&P, you got those models where they can go in and, point to like everything in there.
Right. I think it's mostly just giving them some ideas of ways that they can self-assess. I don't know that we're actually holding their hand as they do it,
sure,
but giving them different ways in which they can self-assess. Some students love the blank diagrams. Others are all about the sticky tabs and actually putting them on the models and on the skeletons. And others are note card kings and queens. And,
sure,
just kind of looking to see what works for them.
Yeah, and I mean, you bring up an important point that, sometimes, we make assumptions on students know how to learn, but they don't necessarily know how to learn. And, having these various different ways where we're teaching them how to self-assess is really powerful as they go forward, to make them into lifelong learners. So I'm definitely a huge fan of that.
I also require some computer time. I know it's kind of an archaic thing because back in the days when we just wanted to get our computer lab used was when we created this. I kind of followed Bill Cotter with this, and then he retired, and I have continued it. But I pushed them to go online to find sites where they can self-quiz, where they can get tutorials and have videos and things like that. Or actually give them it's an all or nothing, 20 points or 0 points, where they can document that they've actually been online doing that, because some of them are very phobic of actually getting on the internet. I know we think our students are way above us in terms of that ability, but I have a lot of non-traditional students, and that's not necessarily the case.
Right.
And even some homeschooled kids that have come in, they haven't been pushed to the technology as much. So that's a way to get them out to looking at other ways that they can self-assess.
Very cool. Thank you. So another part of this whole grading and assessment and feedback is, if you're going to give a timed test, make sure that students are aware of this before they even access the test, well outside of that particular exam. It may be in your syllabus when you say, hey, exam is going to be week 3, it will be a timed test. This gives students an opportunity to ask for an accommodation if it's necessary. And it just kind of helps them mentally prepare for what's going on. So also, in addition to having timed tests, you may think that I don't think deadlines and timeliness is important, right? Actually, I do. But there also has to be a balance between what is being assessed for the objective and, are we assessing a deadline? But deadlines can also be weaved into your objectives, right? That timeliness as part of your criteria is necessary and essential. So just making sure that, in your syllabus, in your important information, as part of the assignment, what have you, stressing that the importance of, timeliness. But why? Why is the timeliness important, right? Because part of, being an instructor is you are an expert in your discipline. And being an expert in your discipline, there are certain expectations, there's things that make you an expert. And getting students to think as an expert, this is part of it. So being able to talk about that, weave that in. And this is where I think, is tied back to Jan, is having a printable weekly checklist with details. What is due? How can you access this, and making that available. So the strategy that you talked about, Jan, is part of the research is actually a very powerful strategy to keep folks on track, to help make them successful, even in terms of assessment. So kudos.
When I switched to the online in March, where we had to spin on a dime there, that was the one thing that I actually added in that I thought was really very important, was having a very clear document that they had access to, where they could actually take a look and see, what YouTube videos did they need to view, what question sheet was due. And then I would constantly put in reminders for them through posting announcements saying, okay, now pay attention, you have a due date coming up for such and such. And I was able to kind of keep them on track really well by doing that, because they had so many other things happening in their lives that they lose track of that. If they have a document they can go to and see where they are and what's due when, that was incredibly important, I thought.
Yeah, I think all these things, definitely for an online course, take some time up front to build, but they are tremendously valuable to students. by making these things pretty much, they end up being transparent because they're right there. This is what we're going to do this week, and this is how we're going to handle those. Allows them to really focus on the content. So, Cindy, she has, every single due date in her syllabus, and it's also posted in the Blackboard calendar. Once again, these are just tools to help students stay on track and really just focus on your content. So leverage Blackboard, and Google Docs and all these other tools that you have to do this. And some is like, well, it's the student's responsibility. I here I am all these years later. I've been out of school for a while, and sometimes it's just nice to have a reminder, even though I'm responsible for managing my own tasks. It helps. For those big things, highlight them, foot stomp them, put them in announcements, put them in your module overviews, strategies that we've talked about. Definitely weave those into your courses. So can't foot stomp that enough. So real quick, students have, access to a grade book. Are you using the grade book? Are you using Blackboard's grade book? How do they know what their grades are? Things like that. 3 of 7. 3 of 7. And Jan mentioned that the syllabus got a framework there, and just following it up. So we have 5 out of 7, 5 out of 7, 5 out of 7. All right, most of you are using the grade book. So, well, at least everyone that answered. So very cool, thank you. Yep, grade book. I think it's also a tool to help faculty. If everything is in the grade book, and the grade book is up to date, students know where they're at, and they have a tendency to ask less questions. But they have to know how to use the grade book, right? So making sure that it's up to date throughout the term will keep them on track. But also, I would encourage creating a short video of your grade book and showing them how they can go about, accessing the feedback that you provide, and just kind of give them a quick scan of the grade book and talk to them, and tamp down their worries of the course. So in my course, I have lots of different tasks that they can do, but they don't necessarily have to do them all. And so when they first see my course, they start hyperventilating. And so I've created a video to walk them off the ledge and make sure that they're not going to drop the course simply because they panicked when they saw what's available to them. So, and part of that is talking in the grade book how everything worked. And then when you grade stuff, follow it up with an email to say, hey, all the grades are posted for this particular assignment. Go in there, look at the associated feedback, and just that follow-up, that you want them to look at the feedback, not just the grade. And you may have some reflective piece that you ask them to go review your feedback and use that in a reflective piece that they then subsequently turn in. Right, so that's how, one way that you can get them to look at your feedback. We'll skip that because I'm already busting my time limit. So, but we are coming very close to the end. This is another way of assessment or feedback, but this is actually for you as the instructor. So John Keating has heard from friends that Canvas has replaced Blackboard. I haven't been told yet. So I can't speak to that, John. Sorry. You know, and it would require us as an institution to have that conversation with everybody if we were to switch LMSs. So
yeah, I've heard from other friends at other schools, universities, you know, that they just replaced Blackboard, and I didn't know if that's something JCC, or is that kind of a momentum thing that's happening now?
Well, so I do know that SUNY is in the process of renewing contracts, and that our contract with Blackboard is coming to an end. And they're, you know, put out a request for proposals to, you know, whether or not, you know, that will switch LMSs. But once again, we don't have to buy into that switch, you know, that we can continue on, you know, with Blackboard. So can we go back to Angel? Just kidding. No, because Blackboard bought Angel and then killed it. So no. So, but there's other LMSs out there, and same principle, same strategies apply. Tactics are, you know, they can be a little different. So, but anyways, so in this point, providing opportunities for students to you know, say put out a survey asking them about different aspects of your course and what they like and what they don't like, and, you know, giving you an opportunity to improve your course throughout their feedback. And it doesn't necessarily have to wait until the end of course. That maybe 3 weeks into the course saying, okay, you know, I've asked you to do X, Y, and Z. What are you thinking about this? You know, is there ways that we can improve it? You know, give me some feedback, and building a survey in. So maybe, you know, every 4 months, or not 4 months, every 4 weeks that you ask them for feedback, you know, so you can make adjustments in your course that helps them learn your content better. So definitely a strategy. So this is where they would talk about maybe the navigation structure, access, you know, just the overall experience. That doesn't necessarily mean that, you know, you have to fall to the whims of the student and totally change over your course because they would like something here as opposed to there. You know, it's like all feedback. You know, when I do a course review for somebody, that is simply feedback. If you elect to use it, that's up to you. Ideally, it'll help make your course better, but, you know, it's simply feedback. Okay. Thanks, Andrew. And, you know, having that suggestion box. So one of the discussions that I see a lot of folks have is a place where folks have questions, Q&A about the course, that they can do this. Okay. Susan, classroom management for Zoom courses. You'll have to give me more. So having a suggestion box available, and you can do this as a group, right? Have students collect as a group, you know, collect all the commentary, and then have them submit it anonymously. And so that is a way, you know, another way that you can get that feedback from the students to help you, you know, is maybe make it an assignment where they all contribute. They have to turn in something, you know, as a collective. So coming to class with a skirt, no shirt, no sandals, no service. Yep. And depending on where you're at, no mask too. So, and then finally, you know, other opportunities that, you know, maybe after a few weeks in the course, have them send you a note 3 things they like about the course, 3 things that they would like to see improved, and doing that. So we talked about making sure that you had, really clear grading policies to include late submissions, having a variety and frequency throughout your course of different ways to assess content, that you're using tools like rubrics or exemplary work to help clarify what you're expecting from students, that you're giving students opportunities to self-assess throughout their course, through reflective assignments or just, quizzes that maybe for extra credit, something like that. And if you're giving, anything that requires a time response, that you make sure that you give it in enough time that they can ask for accommodation if necessary. That you're making sure students have a well-designed and up-to-date grade book, and multiple opportunities to provide you feedback on how you can make the course better. So, any questions? Any thoughts, any commentary? Tomatoes? And you can unmute and feel free to share. Anybody have any questions? Anything that's burning that I should be working on for you? And Anne, if you would be so kind to put your full name into the chat, I would be certainly grateful. So Jan, to actually use the features, LinkedIn Learning, the LinkedIn Learning course is awesome for that. And I would definitely encourage that. But also, if you need something, happy to help you.
Okay. Thank you.
Thanks, Anne. Okay. Oh, yeah. I got links to share. All right. So here's a couple links. One is I have a document with things that I've covered today, plus more. And let me share that with you. Okay, so in the chat, I am, let me get out of that. And here is a document of things that I'm sharing. If you would like the previous sessions, off the TI website, under courses, I have summer initiative. And so that link is now available to you. And I will, once I get the video posted, I will then switch that out. So you'll have a YouTube link for this session, as well as the guide, which I just shared with you. So there's 2 links I just shared with you. And then we'll see you potentially in another session. So yeah, anybody have anything else that they, if not, I will hang out for a little bit, for a few seconds. But other than that, enjoy your afternoon, and hopefully it's not 90+ degrees where you're at. So
It is, but you have a nice day anyways.
yeah,
I'd have been outside if I could have managed it.
yeah.
So have a good one, Stan. Thank you.
You're welcome. Have a great day. All right. I am gonna finish up. So I'm gonna stop sharing, and I am gonna end so I can get this recording up. Have a wonderful day, folks.